Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. Today we've got two completely brand new werewolf stories, so let's get started right away with the first one, which I call The Werewolf of North Riverdale. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I grew up in the Bronx, but we never called it the Bronx back then. We called it Riverdale, as in Archie and Veronica. Riverdale was a part of the Bronx that Archie supposedly was originally set in, but being associated with the Bronx became so uncool by the time I was a kid that I think Archie Comics claimed it was based on New Rochelle or something instead. My parents instructed me to always tell people I came from Riverdale, not the Bronx, if I wanted to be taken seriously in life. They wanted me to grow up to be a dentist so that I could afford to move out of the Bronx entirely and then be honest about where I lived instead. Maybe it was because of their insistence that we must always keep up appearances that I never told them about the time I encountered a Dogman. Right in the Bronx, right in Riverdale, North Riverdale. We lived in these giant buildings, and I liked it there because a lot of my friends lived close by. I could visit some of them without even having to step outside, and pretty much all the rest of them lived on the other side of Fieldston Road. My best friend Tommy and I used to spend Saturdays together whenever we could, especially in the summer. We would walk from Fieldston Road all the way past the old age home my grandmother was locked up in, over to where the stables were. You could actually ride horses there. Well, you could, but not me. I couldn't afford it, and when I asked my mother for the money, she gave me a lecture about how I was too feeble to do athletic things, and that if I tried, I would end up breaking my neck. I asked my dad, and he said he couldn't afford it. So I was too feeble and too broke to ride the horses, but I would love to go over there and catch glimpses of less feeble, richer people living out my dreams. I don't know if Tommy loved it as much as I did, but he went along with me because his mother would always tell him to get outside and get the stink blown off you. On some days, usually when Tommy got bored of watching me watch the people ride the horses, we would venture past the stables and into the forest. There was a lot of forest, or at least it seemed like a lot to me when I was a kid. Paths wound all through it, I guess mainly there for the horses, and we would step to the side when they would want to pass us. Tommy and I developed ways of knowing which way we were going to ensure that we would always get back home without getting lost when the sun started to go down. We even made a kind of a game out of it, calling out odd things we'd noticed about trees or rocks when we went past them. Since trees grow and rocks get moved around, we would constantly update our landmarks, and we were always on the lookout for new ones. So this one year, I can't remember which year, but it was back in the 1970s. It stayed cold longer than usual and then got warm suddenly. We hadn't been to the woods past the stable in so long, we were really itching to go. When we got there, 2 of our landmark trees were gone. Apparently, they had either been removed by landscaping people or possibly they fell in storms and were removed as a necessity. We were giddy with excitement that winter was finally over, and we were a bit careless and overconfident in our abilities to navigate ourselves home from any place in the forest there. I remember Tommy turning over a rock to see if it had bugs under it, and boy did it. All kinds of creepy, crawly things, including a bunch of white larva-looking nasties. Tommy surprised me by reaching his hand right into them, grabbing a bunch up, then running after me as though he was going to throw them at me. I screamed and ran away into the woods itself. By that I mean off the path and in between the trees. Tommy chased me for a long time. I remember getting winded. I remember my side hurting from running too much. I remember getting dizzy, and I remember him finally catching up to me. He had hardly any bugs left in his hand by that point, and I easily batted them away after he dumped them on me as I lay on the ground trying to catch my breath. We rolled on the ground, laughing hysterically and struggling for breath for a long time afterward. Neither of us were in great shape, and that was the first time we had exerted ourselves since the previous autumn, so we both needed to take some time to recover. I can't remember, but I think I might have dozed off because all of a sudden, Tommy was saying something, and he was sounding scared. I realized it was kind of dark out. We normally would be home by the time it was that dark. By then, I was awake enough to understand that he was asking me if I remembered which way we had come into this clearing. We had rolled around on the ground so much that he had lost his bearings. I could tell he was trying not to sound scared, which got me scared too. I began panicking before even looking around, which is a bad way to go about things. It took me a while until I remembered we had run past white rocks when we came in, and there were only white rocks in one area of this clearing. So I pointed, got to my feet, and started walking as quickly and confidently as I could toward those white rocks, hoping Tommy didn't notice that I was as scared as he was. As we entered the tree cover, I had to stop and let my eyes adjust to the darkness. Tommy was fretting, saying stuff about how we were lost, how we were at least in trouble. Maybe we were dead for all he knew. I told him he was being ridiculous. "What kind of apex predator do you think is going to eat us up, Tommy?" I asked him. "We're in Riverdale, for crying out loud, not the jungles of Borneo." That last part made him laugh and lightened my spirits a bit too. I was certain we would find our way out and home. I started relaxing about that part of things and getting nervous about being in trouble with my parents for coming home late instead. This was the time before cell phones. I debated in my head if I should call them from the payphone we could pass on the way home. That would make our trip home a little bit longer because it was a bit out of our way, but at least our parents wouldn't worry. Then again, that would give them plenty of time to think about their punishments and lectures for us before we got there. Maybe it might be better if they thought we were lost. Then they might be happier to see us. These are the tough decisions facing kids, you know. At least, I thought they were. Until suddenly, we had a much bigger problem. We walked right back into that same clearing. It seemed impossible, but it happened. "We made the wrong turn back there," I said, rushing back the way we came before Tommy could respond. I stayed in front now, not wanting to entertain questions from him while I looked for where we could have made the wrong turn. I heard Tommy scream behind me and turned around to see something even less possible than what had already happened. You may have guessed by now that I turned around and saw a Dogman, but this was not just a Dogman. I saw something that was almost comically large, just ridiculously large, bigger than a bear. Unnecessarily large. I mean, this seemed like a lot of woods to me as a kid, but even then I knew it wasn't enough to support the world's largest land predator. Nah, even as a kid I knew there was something wrong with this picture besides the fact that we were now on the radar of a giant monster. Well, let's be clear, this wasn't Godzilla or King Kong size, but this was too big to be real size. It looked real, though, in the way that modern movie werewolves look. I never thought of it as a Dogman. I hadn't heard that term yet. I think I just thought it was a dog-headed monster. I didn't think of it as a werewolf, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It seemed like an animal. But somehow, I didn't think it was an animal in the same sense as wolves or bear or dogs or coyote. I'm not sure what I mean by that, but it just seemed like it walked out of a book, like a scary book. It did not feel like it walked out of a movie because in those days we didn't have movies with special effects that realistic. But it had to be real because I was facing it, and my friend Tommy was facing it, and we were both seeing it, and it was looking back and forth at both of us. Tommy must have been only 20 or 30 feet away from that thing, and all I could see was his back, not his face. Even so, I can just imagine his expression. The monster was 3 times taller than Tommy, and he was wide enough that I could see him on either side of my friend as well. His eyes looked absolutely insane and crazy, like a maniac in a movie. He opened his mouth and let out this animal noise that reminded me of a hyena, in that it nearly sounded like he was laughing at us. I screamed Tommy's name and said, "Let's go," before turning and running myself. I prayed he was following me, but I had no idea. I just remember running and dodging branches and jumping bushes, and the entire time I heard someone or something behind me. I just hoped it was Tommy and not the other option. Finally, I came upon what I took to be a clearing in the woods, and I ran out, not slowing down. I literally had no idea at all where I was running to. Just then, something reached out and grabbed my right shoulder. I stopped running and screamed, then turned to fight that thing. Only it wasn't that thing. It was Tommy. He was too winded to talk, but he pointed to his right and to my left. I looked, and I saw the stables. We both knew the rest of the way home and collapsed to the grass in relief. It almost seemed funny after a while. We had been running from a giant dog-headed bear man. Nobody would believe us. It would have to be our secret, I suggested. Tommy thought the whole thing was so funny, he acted out telling his dad that the reason he was late was that a giant dog-headed hairy man had chased him through the forest. Then he acted out his dad punishing him. We were so relieved to be alive that even being in trouble with our parents seemed humorous. I play-acted a scene of my own. "Dad?" "Yes, son?" "I got chased by a giant dog-headed monster through the woods." "And is that why you're so late?" "No, I would have been later, but I was so scared of the monster I ran home twice as fast." Dun-dun. Tommy didn't laugh at my joke, and I wondered why. I looked up to see. He wasn't there any longer. Looking around in panic, I saw him running away toward our building. I wondered why. Then I heard leaves move behind me. Looking back, I realized before my eyes even fell upon it what Tommy was running from. I didn't have to look for long. I didn't take in many details, but the overwhelming size of that thing once again twisted my brain in circles as I tried to fathom how it could actually exist. That was the last time I would look back. I ran toward the old age home and past it to where there were more people around. I couldn't sustain a run all the way back, but I walked as fast as I could. Tommy was nowhere in sight, and the neighborhood was not as nice at night back then as it was during the day, so I was still pretty scared. I forget what street I was walking on when a car beeped at me and made me jump out of my skin. It was Tommy's parents in their car. They had Tommy in the back seat and had doubled back to search for me. They took me home to my parents and soothed things over for me. They were much more lenient than my parents, but my dad liked them, so I didn't get lectured as long as I had expected, and no real punishment at all. Maybe it had helped that Dad's sports team won that day, I don't know, but I got lucky. That was the last time I ventured out past the stables, and I really only went to visit the stables a couple or 3 more times after that. Tommy never wanted to go near those trees again. He wouldn't tell anyone else why, but I knew it was because he was deathly afraid of the Werewolf of North Riverdale. Don't go anywhere. We've got another all-new Dogman story coming up right after this.
I'd like to take a moment to say that if you have a scary story you'd like to tell us here, you can write Peter at peterbernard.com, or you can call our new Scary Stories hotline number and leave it to us in the form of a voicemail message. It's easy to remember. 804-LESCARY. That's 804-LESCARY, or 804-537-2279.
Wolfman or Dear Scary Stories. When I used to live in Pennsylvania with my wife, in the shadow of the nuclear power plant out there, I once saw a very strange creature in the woods. At the time, and this is many years ago, I felt strongly that the creature was the result of nuclear radiation or something along those lines. I used to watch Toxic Avenger movies and the cartoon show as well. Actually, I don't think they had the cartoons yet when this sighting happened. For the second part of the story to make any sense at all to you, I actually have to go back to a little bit before I saw the monster. Earlier in that day, or really about an hour earlier, I guess, I was at a diner that I used to walk to when I wanted comfort food and to be alone. It was located about a 10-minute drive away, but if I walked a shortcut in the woods, I could get there in about 15 minutes on foot. So when the weather was nice or when my wife had the car, that's how I would get there. On this one day, there was a particularly beautiful young woman in the diner. I know, I just told you I was and am married, but I didn't notice this woman for weird reasons. I wasn't flirting with her or anything. She was just very dressed up and very made up, a whole lot of makeup. She looked like she was in a movie, so I kept looking around for hidden cameras or something like that. Everything about her was odd. I tried not to stare, and I noticed the other people there that late afternoon or early evening were also trying not to openly gawk. And one of them was a woman, so I'm not trying to say anything sexist or anything like that. This young woman was extremely out of place out there in that rural town. She must be driving through, I thought. But even that seemed odd. There was no place worth dressing up like that within a day's driving distance of that town. Not that I knew of, at least. After she left, I noticed I hadn't eaten my food. She had so distracted me, so I wolfed it down, if you'll forgive the expression, and then I headed out into the woods to walk home before it got too dark to make the journey. At about the halfway mark home, I began to hear something in the bushes. I quietly snuck over to look, not wanting to scare off the deer or squirrel or whatever it might turn out to be. Well, it was not a deer, and it was not a squirrel. It was the most incredible looking thing I had ever seen. It looked like Lon Chaney the Wolfman, only it didn't have any clothes on. It was just a pure animal. I don't want to say it looked exactly like Lon Chaney Jr. since its nose or snout was longer, more like that of a real wolf. Other than that, its fur was long and silver or white. It looked incredible. It nearly glowed in the remaining sunlight. I didn't think it had smelled or seen me yet, and I backed away as slowly and quietly as I could manage. I heard a crashing sound as whatever that was made a sudden movement, and I dropped to my knees, thinking I was about to be pounced on. It took me a few seconds to notice that the loud sound of the Wolfman crashing into the woods was moving further and further away. I was safe. It had left. I gathered my breath and my dignity and went home. Cut to 3 years later. I was back at that same diner, only this time I was with my wife and we had driven there. I no longer took that path through the woods. You can tell me why. I don't have to tell you. Okay, so my wife was in the ladies' room and I was gazing out across the highway. I saw the most incredible thing. It was that werewolf, and it was running out of the woods so fast that it tripped and fell onto the pavement on the highway. It was looking behind it as though running away from something. And then I saw what it was running away from. A guy in a plaid shirt and baseball hat and jeans had come out of the forest holding something long, metallic, and dangerous in his hands. It was a hunter. He was trying to kill that Wolfman. I literally spilled my coffee seeing this. My eyes went back to the monster as I saw the fur on its back literally melt away. It was running across the highway toward my side, shrinking in size, melting back into a human form. And before it ducked into the bushes alongside the diner, I distinctly made out that it was not a man that it was turning back into. It was a woman. My wife came back from the ladies' room and wanted to go, but I didn't think it was safe out there, and I talked her into letting me get another cup of coffee. I watched that hunter outside, looking around, up and down the highway. He obviously had not seen the Wolfman. I mean the wolf woman. He hadn't seen her cross the highway. After a while, he left, walking back into the woods, and I breathed a sigh of relief. As I finished my coffee and we prepared to leave, a woman walked into the diner. I was counting money and didn't really notice her, but my wife whispered to me, "My, look at that beautiful woman that just came in. Do you think she might be a movie star?" And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend, we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
If you enjoyed this, please click like or consider subscribing. Remember to click the bell icon or you won't get notifications. If you want to listen to Bigfoot's secret uncensored story each Sunday, just go to peterbernard.com and become a paid subscriber. See you tomorrow. Same dog time, same dog channel.
Come back for more scary stories.